I'm Usman Anwar, and welcome back to Flinto. We often picture the fall of great nations as epic battles against outside enemies. But history shows us the real threat often comes from within: corruption, greed, and leaders who put themselves above the public good. When trust in institutions collapses and division is stoked for political gain, even the mightiest empires crumble. Today we'll uncover how bad politics hollowed out some of history's greatest civilizations, and what lessons we can learn for our own turbulent times. Let's dive in. Let's start with Rome, the superpower whose real enemy was itself. The Republic's political system became a battleground for the ambitious, with generals like Marius and Sulla turning their armies on Rome itself. The Senate devolved into a corrupt conspiratorial mess, and emperors like Caligula and Nero ruled through fear and self-indulgence. The Praetorian Guard assassinated emperors and sold the throne to the highest bidder, creating endless instability. Corruption trickled down, governors extorted provinces, soldiers went unpaid, and resentment festered. Even in crisis, leaders prioritized personal rivalries over unity. By the time invaders arrived, Rome was already hollowed out by its own political failures. The lesson? Military might is useless without political integrity. The Byzantine Empire survived Rome's fall, but its politics were a minefield of betrayal. Emperors faced constant coups, poisonings, and palace intrigue, often from their own families or powerful eunuchs. Reforms were undone out of spite, and generals sabotaged each other even during invasions. The infamous Fourth Crusade wasn't an outside attack, but an inside job, invited by a deposed prince. This culture of treachery eroded the empire from within, leaving it weak and divided. By the time the Ottomans arrived, Byzantium was a shell, destroyed by its own elite. Internal decay, not foreign conquest, sealed its fate. The Ottoman Empire, once a meritocracy, decayed into a corrupt, nepotistic state. Government jobs were sold or handed to unqualified relatives, and tax farming brutalized the population. Sultans raised in isolation became detached and paranoid, while real power shifted to palace factions. The Janissaries, once elite soldiers, turned into a corrupt political force resisting reform. Every attempt at modernization was blocked by those protecting their privileges. Corruption hollowed out the military and administration, leaving the empire unable to adapt. By World War I, the Ottomans were a patchwork of resentful groups, governed by a broken system. The empire's collapse was the inevitable result of centuries of political rot. The Soviet Union promised a workers' paradise, but built a system on lies, fear, and corruption. Censorship was total, history was rewritten, and propaganda masked economic failure. Nobody trusted the state, cynicism replaced belief. Central planning bred inefficiency and a massive black market, while the elite enjoyed privileges denied to ordinary citizens. Military spending drained the economy, and political repression stifled reform. When Gorbachev tried to open up the system, the truth shattered the brittle regime. The USSR collapsed, not from outside pressure, but from the weight of its own contradictions. Authoritarianism, once its strength, became its fatal flaw. The British Empire ruled a quarter of the world, but its foundation was exploitation and arrogance. While Britain became more democratic at home, it denied rights to its colonial subjects, fueling resentment and nationalist movements. Political arrogance led to disasters like the partition of India, unleashing violence and chaos. The Suez Crisis exposed Britain's diminished power and outdated imperial mindset. The empire fell not to conquest, but because its political justifications crumbled. The ideals of liberty and self-determination, once Britain's rallying cry, became the tools of its own undoing. The sun set on the empire because its own ideology became indefensible. Yugoslavia was a multi-ethnic state held together by Tito's leadership. After his death, corrupt leaders weaponized ethnic divisions for personal power. Politicians like Milosevic stoked old grievances, turning neighbors into enemies. State media spread hate, and politics became a zero-sum battle for ethnic survival. The result: brutal wars, ethnic cleansing, and the destruction of a once unified nation. Yugoslavia's collapse wasn't inevitable. It was engineered by leaders who chose hate over unity. The real enemy was within. Venezuela, rich in oil, should have been prosperous. Instead, decades of corruption and mismanagement turned wealth into a curse. Chavez used oil money for social programs but dismantled democratic checks, replacing experts with loyalists. When oil prices fell, the economy collapsed. Hyperinflation, shortages, and repression followed. Billions vanished into the pockets of a corrupt elite, while infrastructure crumbled. Over 7 million fled the country, creating a humanitarian crisis. Venezuela's tragedy is a warning. No resource can save a nation from political rot. Leadership matters more than wealth. Iraq's modern history is a cycle of dictatorship, war, and corruption. Saddam Hussein ruled through terror, stoking sectarian divisions and launching disastrous wars for personal glory. His fall didn't bring stability. Instead, corruption and sectarianism filled the vacuum. Competing factions fought for power and oil wealth, while extremist groups thrived in the chaos. Iraq's suffering is the legacy of absolute power and political decay. The dictator's trap is hard to escape, even after the dictator is gone. The lesson: unchecked power destroys nations from within. Afghanistan's instability is rooted in weak governance and corruption, not just foreign intervention. Real power often lay with warlords, not the central government, making unity impossible. Decades of conflict empowered local strongmen and fueled breathtaking corruption. Aid money vanished, officials demanded bribes, and the government lost public trust. The Afghan army was hollowed out by ghost soldiers, salaries pocketed by corrupt officers. When foreign support ended, the system collapsed almost overnight. Afghanistan's fall was the final act of a state already undermined from within. So what do these stories teach us? The greatest threat to nations is often internal decay, corruption, division, and leaders who put self above service. No country is immune. The US faces polarization and distrust. China relies on brittle authoritarian control. Russia repeats the mistakes of the past. These aren't just old stories, they're warnings. Political abuse is a slow poison, eroding trust and hollowing out institutions. Collapse may seem sudden, but it's built on years of bad choices. The real question: will we recognize the warning signs and demand better before it's too late? History's lessons are clear, if we're willing to listen. The ghosts of fallen empires remind us, the greatest danger is ourselves. Will we repeat their mistakes or learn from them? Do you see the same symptoms of decay in today's world powers? Share your thoughts in the comments. This conversation matters. Thanks for joining me on Flinto File. If you found this insightful, like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's lessons. See you next time.